Does the Book of Enoch contradict the Bible? This has been such a fun topic to explore, and this episode, while I'm going to go as deep as I can, I realize it's only scratching the surface. There is so much here. This is a topic that I've been really excited to talk about on this channel. Now, Enoch is mentioned in the Bible. There are only 97 words discussing Enoch and who he was and what he did. Now, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and back in 1830, Joseph Smith, he revealed 4,000 words about Enoch. And so we have a lot more detail about Enoch. Now, when we look at these 4,000 words that Joseph Smith provided to us about Enoch, he didn't give us an explanation of where they came from. They weren't translated from anything, so there wasn't an ancient manuscript to borrow from. He didn't have any scholarly access or anything like that. And there was nothing else to corroborate. There were no writings that were similar that he could have drawn from. Now, I'm a believer in prophets from the days of Adam to Moses to Noah to Enoch to Isaiah and Jeremiah. I believe in the callings of the apostles as prophets like Peter, James, and John. And so as we look at Joseph Smith and question, is he a true prophet? It's a very interesting question to ask as we explore this topic of, does the Book of Enoch contradict the Bible? Because where did the Book of Enoch come from that the world at large has? So this is over a century later after Joseph Smith gave us the 4,000 words about Enoch. There were fragments that were discovered in a cave. These were writings that no one had seen for over 2,000 years. And what's amazing is this writing of Enoch that was discovered in the cave so closely matched and mirrored the things that Joseph Smith revealed to us 100 years previous. The same names were used, the same stories, the same details. So here's the question: what if prophets didn't just exist in the past? What if they still exist today? In this episode, I'll show you how the Book of Enoch, once lost but now resurfaced, it helps confirm the idea of modern revelation. And also why the most accurate form of Enoch we've ever had did not come from archaeology. It came from a farm boy with no formal education who was called as a prophet in 1820. Let's take a look at where Enoch is mentioned in the Bible. Okay, the first reference we go to is in Genesis. This is Genesis 5, verses 18 through 24. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So in these verses, Enoch was introduced as the seventh generation from Adam. He was the son of Jared, the father of Methuselah. Enoch lived 365 years, and he walked with God, and he did not die. Instead, God took him. And when we look at the interpretation, we think that this means taken alive into heaven. Now, another reference to Enoch is in 1 Chronicles. This is chapter 1, verse 3. His name is mentioned there as it lists the genealogy from Adam down to Abraham. Another place that Enoch is mentioned is in Luke chapter 3, verse 37. Here it mentions Enoch in the genealogy of Jesus, saying that Jesus descended through his line. Another place that he is mentioned is in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. And let's look at one more verse in Jude chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. Now, what's interesting about that verse right there is that's the only direct quote that we see that matches the New Testament or the Bible with the Book of Enoch, this writing that was found in the cave. Okay, so there is this direct quote here. What this shows is the early church's familiarity with Enoch. All right, so I created this spreadsheet here, which I'm going to show you, but as I describe it, I'm going to have my editing team show this in better detail because this is just really small writing for you. But what we're looking at here is 5 different texts. Okay, so where they came from, how they were found, and when were they translated, what was on them. Okay, so we have 5 different books that are the Book of Enoch. So this first one, it was discovered in Ethiopia, preserved by the Ethiopian church. It was in the Ethiopic language. It was translated into English by 1883, and it became available in the United States by the late 1800s. Now, it's unlikely that Joseph Smith had any access to this. It had an extremely limited distribution. It was not mainstream at all and didn't even come to the United States until the late 1800s. Okay, so what about the Dead Sea Scrolls? Well, we've got fragments of First Enoch. It was found in Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. It was written in Aramaic, and it was translated into English over the period of 1956 to 1970. So that made it available in the 1960s and 70s in the United States. So could Joseph Smith have access to this? No, obviously not. But this translation confirmed a lot of the things that Joseph Smith revealed back in 1830. The next one is the Book of Giants. This also came from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, my understanding of the Book of Giants is we're not talking about very large people. We're talking about people that are large in personality or large in position, like leadership. So the Book of the Giants could be like a book of kings or a book of prophets or a book of leaders. Let's see. This was also written in Aramaic and translated between 1976 and the 1980s. And so it became available in the United States in the 1980s and beyond. Now, what's really interesting is anywhere in Scripture, even canonized or apocryphal, there's only one mention of the name Mahuja or Mahijah. It's only mentioned in one place, and that's right here in the Book of Giants. But it's also mentioned by Joseph Smith. So the writings that we received about Enoch contain that name, and then we never saw it again until the Dead Sea Scrolls came about and we found this Book of the Giants. The next Book of Enoch that we can look at, we'll call here 2 Enoch. This was discovered and preserved in Russia and Eastern Europe. And so the language was Old Church Slavonic. It was translated by a man named R.H. Charles in 1896. And it didn't become available in the United States until the 1900s. It's interesting to look at the details of this writing of the Book of Enoch and compare it to the writings we received from Joseph Smith. The last one we're going to look at, we're going to call 3 Enoch. This was found in medieval Europe, and it's described as Jewish mystical texts. It was written in Hebrew, and it was somewhat translated into English in 1928. But more thorough translations that happened in the 1950s and the 60s, this became available in the United States in the mid-1900s. So let's get into the details of some of the fascinating things that we learn from these 5 new books of Enoch. So on the topic of angels or watchers, what doctrine or what teachings do we find there? Well, in the Book of Enoch, angels are called watchers. They descend, they intermarry with humans, and they produce giants or Nephilim. Kind of interesting, all right? It briefly mentions the sons of God and giants, but without any detail. And where the Book of Enoch here contradicts with the Bible is the Bible doesn't blame angels for the flood, but Enoch makes this the centerpiece. And the Catholic and the Protestant theology typically rejects the idea of angels physically reproducing. So we're just looking at what do these books of Enoch say? Do they contradict the Bible? And then we're going to bring it full circle. So the next area that we're looking at is heaven, hell, and the afterlife. What do we see in the Book of Enoch? Or what do we see in the Bible, and how do they contradict? So Enoch describes a highly structured, multi-tiered heaven, multiple abodes of the dead, and punishment for fallen angels. Now, the Bible, we can look at this a couple different ways. The Catholic view emphasizes purgatory, hell, and heaven, based more on later doctrinal development. The Protestant King James Version is less detailed on afterlife geography. Where they really diverge is Enoch's view of Sheol, spirit prisons, and cosmic geography is far more elaborate. As we've been able to study the Book of Mormon more and more and use artificial intelligence to look at word patterns and figure out who the authors are of different things and really look at the history, and as we've done more archaeology and found things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, we now have a much more clear picture of what things in the Bible have changed over time and what parts are missing. Now, in the Book of Mormon that was brought forth in 1830, we have the writings of Nephi. So if we look here in 1 Nephi chapter 13, verses 26 through 29, and this is talking about the writings that were written by the apostles. And after they go forth by the hand of the 12 apostles of the Lamb, from the Jews unto the Gentiles, thou seest the formation of that great and abominable church, which is most abominable above all other churches. So this isn't talking specifically about one denomination, but really people who are influenced by greed and by pride and by war and whatnot to use religion and to use scripture for their own gain. For behold, they have taken away from the gospel of the Lamb many parts which are plain and most precious, and also many covenants of the Lord have they taken away. And all this have they done that they might pervert the right ways of the Lord, that they might blind the eyes and harden the hearts of the children of men. Wherefore thou seest that after the book hath gone forth through the hands of the great and abominable church, that there are many plain and precious things taken away from the book, which is the book of the Lamb of God. So this is interesting. Nephi lived between like 550 BC to 600 BC, somewhere in that range is when he wrote this. So he prophesied of the time when this book of the Jews would go forth unto the Gentiles, but there would be plain and precious things that were lost from it. So let's look at a timeline of what we knew about Enoch, hundreds of years ago, and then the more and more things that have been revealed over time. Okay, so pre-1830, Enoch is only briefly mentioned. Again, we only have 97 words in all of the Bible. We knew that Enoch walked with God and that he was taken. Now, in the spring of 1830, Joseph Smith published the Book of Mormon, and I just give you that date for context because in the fall of 1830, Joseph Smith began work on an inspired translation of the Bible. This wasn't a complete or a comprehensive thing. It was just a retranslation or an inspired translation of parts here and there. We still use the King James Version and will often have the Joseph Smith translation as footnote. Now, in December of 1830, that's when Joseph Smith dictates the words of the Book of Moses. And this includes Moses chapter 6 and 7, which is all about Enoch. It contains a lot of details about the life and the prophecies of Enoch. So in months previous, Joseph had done work to correct and restore through inspiration things in the Bible, but we didn't have a whole lot in the Bible. We received some amazing detail about Enoch. We have details about Enoch's call, about his vision of the future, about his building of Zion. We have details about the weeping of God and being translated with his people. Now, although this was received in December of 1830, it actually wasn't canonized. It was never canonized by Joseph Smith. Now, the church canonized it later as a part of a book called The Pearl of Great Price, so it contains the writings of Abraham and this Book of Moses, and this was in 1880. So prior to Joseph Smith receiving this through Revelation in 1830, we only had like 97 words, but then about 4,000 words were added about Enoch in 1830, canonized in 1880. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. So among them is the Book of the Giants. It was a previously unknown Enochic text, I guess they call it. Now, this Book of the Giants, it included references to Mahujah, who also appears in Joseph Smith's Enoch account. Now, I would view this as miraculous or prophetic. I see Joseph Smith as a prophet. In the 1950s and 60s, we received translations of some of these other Enochian texts. So when we were listing them before, we would call that 1 Enoch or 2 Enoch or 3 Enoch. And the Book of the Giants became translated and became more widely known in English. And it's at that time that scholars began comparing those books of Enoch to the LDS text in the Pearl of Great Price that was brought about through Joseph Smith. I love the work that Jonah Barnes has done on this, and so I want to show you a clip of him describing a lot of the parallels that were found in these books of Enoch with the revelation received to Joseph Smith.
They both describe the wicked generations of Enos, contradiction to Genesis. They both describe the terror at his calling, the fear at his calling, that he wasn't worthy, that he's a lad or a youth. He was reticent to accept it. The utterance, his lips would be the words of the Lord. He would have divine protection and no one would pierce him. All these things are things Joseph said in order that came from then undiscovered books of Enoch.
For me, it's just really cool, and I enjoy learning these things. I've had a testimony of Joseph Smith being a prophet. I have a testimony of the Book of Mormon for many, many years, many decades, actually. So I already knew that Joseph Smith was a prophet, but to learn of these things is very exciting and very fascinating to me.
Okay, now, in contrast, here's what Joseph parallels from books of Enoch that were totally undiscovered at the time. If you bring up the next two things, here you go. Here's just a piece of it. It's like 4 pages long. Here's 2 pages of it. Joseph, first of all, focusing on Enoch. Why even focus on Enoch? He turns 97 words of the Bible into almost 4,000 words on Enoch. Similarly, R.H. Charles says in his pseudepigrapha, page 9, in the footnote of page 9, he says, nearly all New Testament writers were familiar with Enoch. Hugh Nibley says it's a colossus that bestrides the Apocrypha. They both describe Enoch as a scribe. They both describe the wicked generations of Enos, contradiction to Genesis, turning rivers out of their course. He turns rivers out of their course. The mountains will flee. The mountains flee. He walks with God. He offends the populace. They're tent keepers. You recognize all these from the books of Moses. Joseph Smith is making very specific, refutable guesses. Guesses. And they all come true. Not only do they come true in the correct order, which is crazy. It would be like guessing a social security number. If somebody, or a telephone number, if somebody could guess, or a lotto number, and you guess, oh, well, I think it has a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, 7, 8, and number 9 in it. Okay, well, zip-de-doo, what order are they in? He gets them in the right order, which is exponentially harder than just happening to guess them out of place. And he gets them right again and again and again. Mahijah Mahujah is only one of them. The fact that Mahijah Mahujah, not only is the right name, but it's the right setting. It's a guy who comes from the Watchers to inquire of the prophet as to their fate, right? That's a very specific claim. He's the only other named character in the book of Moses that isn't in Genesis. He's the only one that Joseph brings in. He appears in the book of Jasher, and he appears in the book of Giants. In the book of Giants, the exact name appears in the book of Giants. It's impossible. It's impossible.
So if you are curious about what Joseph Smith revealed about Enoch, not just theories, but the full, unfiltered record, I invite you to read it for yourself. Chapters 6 and 7 of the Book of Moses are found in a little book called The Pearl of Great Price. You can get a copy totally for free, delivered right to your door, no matter where in the world you live. 2 missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will bring it personally to you. And while they're at it, they'll also bring you a copy of the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. So to request this delivery, go to scripturedelivery.com. scripturedelivery.com. I hope you enjoy.